Hello from the Camino de Santiago. We've now been walking for several days, and at this point we've covered more than 100 kilometers, which is a fraction of the total route. The truth is that this pilgrimage could take people months, especially if they started in another country like France or Portugal and made their way from there to the end of the road at Santiago de Compostela. Now this raises the question, why? Because people have been doing this for centuries. And it was certainly not something that was easy, as my blistered feet will attest. So what would drive a person to walk for hundreds of kilometers, months at a time, to reach a particular church at the end of the road? Well, in the Middle Ages, which is when the pilgrimage was in its heyday, the main motivation was spiritual benefit. So people believed that if they got to the bones of St. James in the cathedral, that they were going to receive a substantial spiritual benefit, specifically time reduced in purgatory. If you're interested in more about purgatory, I've done a 5-part series on the Reformation. It shows up there as well. But there were additional benefits that could be collected along the way by prayers and visits to churches and other holy sites along the route. But it wasn't entirely spiritually driven all the time. So some people began the pilgrimage with this spiritual benefit in mind. Others were assigned it instead of jail time. And then there were others who perhaps took it because it was a socially sanctioned way to travel. You got to leave behind your regular identity, your job, your routine, your family, and you had permission to take months out of your regular life and make a journey through lands that you otherwise might not ever see. Setting off on a pilgrimage was very much a communally based activity. Typically, the would-be pilgrim would get the blessing of his local parish priest or her local parish priest, because women did it too. They would buy traditional pilgrim garb, which would be a certain hat and a gown and a walking staff, and then they would set off from their communities with the blessings and goodbyes of the priests, their families, their friends, for a journey that could take them an unknown amount of time and over which they might face any number of challenges. Setting out on a pilgrimage like this was in many ways an act of faith, and not just in the spiritual sense. You were relying on the goodness of strangers. You were relying on the mercy of people along the road who were going to provide accommodation for you and food, not at regular travelers' rates. And this was necessary because there was no way that you could pack everything that you needed on your back. So you were going to rely on the help of other people along the road. So there were many reasons for undertaking a journey like this. There were even people who hired pilgrims to do it on their behalf. So you could be hired by some much wealthier person to undertake the pilgrimage in their name, and your feet would get blistered, but apparently they would accrue the spiritual benefit. So there were many reasons that could set a person along this path, from personal spiritual benefit to monetary gain to the increased social status that you would have in perpetuity on your return, as someone who had returned from the pilgrimage, who had tales to tell of lands and people far away, and advice to give other would-be travelers on the road.